Good morning, everyone. My name is Natalia Kornicka. I'm an archaeologist and a 3D technology in archaeology specialist in a leader 3D scanner producer in Poland. For a few years, I was working with artifacts on many scientific projects all over the world, where I had an opportunity to learn a lot about the subject and get to know inside out the profession and its needs. As scientists researching the past, the basics of our work lay in the necessity of the best possible, most precise documentation. The character of historic materials and their sources require strict accuracy and precision with documentation. One of the most important roles of the museums and archaeologists is to protect the artifact, to make them useful for the scientist to their research, and to preserve the object as a cultural heritage for the future generations. The basics of archaeological documentation with its rules applied since the 19th century is manual processing, hand drawings and descriptions. Series of typologies created by outstanding scientists up till today help to unify and clarify such handmade documentation for the widest circles of recipients. But as we can suspect, with that kind of documentation, description contains some dosage of subjectivism, and it depends on the knowledge and the perceptivity of the scientist making the documentation. Also, the literary skills to be able to make descriptions equally understandable for many readers plays a role. Here, the huge help comes from applying the drawings to the archaeological documentation, which makes it easier to unify the reception of elements hard to clear-cut descript as shape or color with all of its variants. But with its form of documentation depends on the talent and perceptivity of the drafter. Drawing and description aid occurring many measuring and interpretation mistakes. It can have a negative impact on the results of the research of the artifact, which includes comparisons and analysis of the morphology of the item. Adding photos to the archaeological documentation set assure better shape and color registration, but also conduce the perspective and lighting errors. Moreover, to correctly register all the details, it's recommended to use the service of a professional photographer who will have all the technical aspects covered. In many cases, to prepare complete photo documentation of an object with all details visible, it is necessary to make a series of photos, especially with, for example, larger size pottery. The photo with the entire shape capture will not show the brush mark. Those small elements can be really important in the research later on. The huge importance of detailed documentation requires archaeologists and museum professionals to use the latest available technologies. When the possibility of creating digital 3D models using photogrammetry appeared in the second half of the 20th century, this method began to be applied to documentation. This created many new opportunities, including museology deeper into digital area. Photogrammetry enables achieving a 3D model of an object based on at least two photos, which are combined by chosen characteristic points or elements. The undoubted advantage of this method is the lack of restriction connected with the size of the measured object and the possibility to achieve a realistic 3D model. In relation to the photo, the software generates the cloud of points, which is transformed into a simple triangle mesh. Then, on the created model, the texture visible on photos is applied, so after processing, 3D models showed colors. Another advantage of using that method is the relatively small cost of the digitalization devices. The disadvantage of that method, especially distinctive for archaeologists, is that coordinates in photogrammetry are assigned in the digital space only to the chosen characteristic points located on the photos. The location of the other ones are only estimated. This can lead to some inaccuracies in measuring, especially for smaller artifacts. For this reason, photogrammetry is mainly used for modeling large architectural objects. The software itself is so advanced that the proper use of this method requires the participation of professionally trained staff. To sum up, photogrammetry enables precise documentation of an object, but only at selected characteristic points for which coordinates can be assigned. Even so, the use of photogrammetry in archaeological documentation increased its accuracy in comparison to one made with traditional methods. Also enables using 3D models for visualization, showing the basic features of the object. Visualization can be used, for example, as a model in a presentation, but the accuracy of this model is not detailed enough for measurements or to do scientific research. However, the newest technology made it possible to create a 3D model that will have a much wider application than just visualization. The implementation of 3D scanner to work with artifacts allow creating a model that can easily be used as a basis for research combined not only with detailed analysis of morphology but also with the exact measuring of an object. There are several different methods of 3D scanning, but I would like to focus on one that, in my opinion, works the best for archaeological and museum work: scanning with structured light technology. It is dedicated to the registration of smaller objects, although it does not exclude the measuring of such larger items as, for example, an airplane. The data from the 3D scanner can be successfully used for digitalization. It is transformation of an object into a digital image. The use of appropriate software enables comprehensive measurements, viral reconstructions, or research based on the 3D model. Digitalization is one of the main roles for most modern museums around the world, as it's the best way to protect, store, and share data about the collections today. Another very important task of museum is archiving. Archiving is a digital record with an accuracy that allows creating a model identical to the archived object. It is an important element because such documentation is a kind of protection of the collection information. It's not only save the actual state of the collection and its exact appearance, but also can be base for the reconstruction of an artifact in case of its destruction or invasive conservation works that change its morphology. Of course, such data also allows for virtual research. Some 3D scanners allow the use of 3D data collected during registration also for archiving processes, as Smartec 3D scanners I am using. To be suitable for archiving, data has to be raw. The scanners that I talked about and which I use daily in my work collected data in the form of a cloud of point, so pure data, where each measured point is placed in the coordinate system. The point cloud is transformed in the software to the triangle mesh, which is easier to read and to work on. 3D scanning with structured light technology allows generating a 3D model identical to the documented object. It can collect even 1000 measurement points on 1 millimeter square of the software. Such accuracy enables to watch a model up close and analyze every detail, including fingerprints on the pottery or microfractures, and easily analyze and even measure such small details as brush marks. It would be really time-consuming to document such details with traditional archaeological methods and would require the involvement of a well-trained, perceptive team. It is also predictable that accurate and effort-free manual measurement for such detail is very difficult, if not impossible. That is why such elements are often inaccurately documented or even ignored. In 3D scanning, apart from placing every point in the coordinate system, each of them has a known measurement uncertainty, which means we know what is a possible mistake in the placement of every point. For scanning with structured light, such a mistake can reach 5 microns. The achievable resolution of the image is the best of all methods that I mentioned in the last episode and can reach 0.01 millimeters. You can impact the accuracy by changing the measuring field, so the volume we can measure with a single scan. Increasing the measuring field leads to decreasing the accuracy of achieved model. It can be useful when, at a certain stage of a research, we don't need an accuracy on the archival level, but we want a smaller size of a data file. All those parameters are extremely important in the digitalization of archaeological objects. 3D models created by scanning with structured light technology, allowing to present the morphology of an object, which form can be manipulated in every way, but also provide the possibility to making precise measurements with an accuracy of a few microns. 3D scanning results with creating a database of perfect digital copies of the collection, on which we can perform various research. Thanks to this, we have a database of a perfect digital copies of a collection, but we can also carry out various research using them. In my work, I use software dedicated to the scanner, SmartTech 3D Measure, so I can manipulate a huge amount of data on my laptop without a specialized workstation, converting point clouds into models that I can measure in every plane, generate their virtual cross-sections, and even compare the models with each other. The program highlights the differences and similarities on the model using color markers. Generating cross-sections alone saves a lot of time and ensures high accuracy. I remember how much precision, time, and knowledge it took to correctly draw the cross-section by hand. Especially correct documentation of the pottery lips and neck shape is a challenge, as they are very important differentiating elements. By generating the cross-section from the system, I can be sure that the dimensions and shapes are correct. For archaeologists, as important as measurements and shapes are the colors and texture of the surface. Not all 3D scanners can capture color. Fortunately, there are ones dedicated to working with artifacts. The model I used comes from this line, registering the colors in the RGB scale, so after generating the triangle mesh, I can apply a texture with color to it, achieving a realistic model that is full representation of the object, giving great research possibilities. The measurement process is touchless, which increases the safety of the delicate artifact, and the process leads to documentation, and it's detailed, precise, and free of most errors that can be developed during traditional manual archaeological documentation. All that is needed is to place the artifact on a rotary table, calibrate it with a scanner, and start the scanning process, and the device will perform the measurement of the whole surface without any interference. A single scan can take less than 1 minute, so depends on the size of an object and the software settings, we can achieve the finished metrical model with a color and texture reproduction in several minutes, when drawing and photograph artifacts with complicated form can take even few hours. If the object is too big to fit into the measuring field, or we don't have the access to the rotary stage, we can make measurements using positioning markers and scanning place by place. Markers are automatically connected by the software, resulting in a cohesive 3D models of an object. Automatization of the process, resulting in a huge time saving when creating documentation. For a better presentation of the benefits of using 3D scans technology in the process of digitalization of the collection, I will use the example of two collections documented in two different ways. A collection of grave pottery from Lima in Peru, documented with traditional archaeological methods, and a database of skulls from Brześć Kujawskie in Poland, made with SmartTech 3D scanner. Tablada de Lurín in Peru is an archaeological site of a great importance for research on the history of the Central Andes, discovered in 1957. The stylistic analysis of the ceramics from Tablada de Lurín allowed determining the time frame for the functioning of the cemetery, placing it in the range between 200 BC and 200. The site owes its great importance to the richness of equipment, especially since the cemetery has not been robbed. The analysis of a group of artifacts from this size, a large close group, unchanged from the moment of its deposit in graves 2,000 years ago, will open up enormous analytical opportunities for archaeologists, primarily providing the basis for creating a detailed database not only for this site, but also every site in the region. The Tablada de Lurín, during its prime, was a place of a great religious importance for the locals. Two of the sacred roads from the region crossed there, so from the moment of discovering the site, scientists correctly suspected that there would be many visible impacts from the regional cultures in the collection from the burials. So, detailed analysis of it goes beyond knowing about the Tablada de Lurín itself and begins to take on the importance of a guidelines for the entire region. Tablada de Lurín achieved great popularity thanks to the diversity of metal artifacts, copper and gold, but it is not the only treasure that the cemetery sites offer to contemporary researchers. The intact burials hide detailed examples of the production of the people who lived in the nowadays Lima region more than 2,000 years ago. Analysis of the historic material from the Tablada de Lurín enable answers to many questions considering the socio-political and religious organization, the technological level, the direction and intensity of trade contacts, and many others. The biggest group of artifacts found in the cemetery are pottery. Since the area of their deposition was intact until the time of scientific works on the cemetery, this collection is a great source of knowledge. One of the biggest importance of the research in Tablada, detailed chronology of the cemetery, could be used for the chronology for other sites in the region that are preserved in a much worse condition. The representative number of ceramic objects found in the Tablada de Lurín makes chronological analysis based on this collection very promising. To reach the goal of unified, useful chronology, it requires a clear, complete, and detailed database of the selected types of grave equipment. Therefore, scientists created a data matrix from the grave pottery that included data such as the place of the discovery, the form of the object description, the texture on the inside and outside surface, the finish of the surface, color and shape of the neck and lip, as well as the object itself, decoration on the surface, and many others. To make the database easier to read and compare, all the features were divided into 45 categories, where different numbers meant different elements of description. To make the documentation more precise, each artifact has photograph documentation that contains between 1 to few different professional photos. The study covered ceramics material from 850 grades. During my analysis, I chose 875 pottery objects from the excavation of those burials to obtain the chronology of dating the graves in which the monuments were found. As you can imagine, the detailed documentation of such a huge collection required the work of a large team of specialists, apart from the exploration of the finds and their initial documentation at the archaeological site, which is standard for most excavations. It consists of very careful exploration, photographic documentation of the site, technical drawing documentation of the place of finding, description of the discovered object in the way that after transporting the object into the laboratory, there is no doubt about what and where each of the artifact is from. Often total station is also used to create a precise map of a site and the discovered artifacts. After this process, which may take up to several days for one object, the process of detailed documentation of each one follows in the laboratory. For a collection like the 875 pottery sets of my choice, this process can take several months or even years, depending on the complexity of the construction of the items. The process of preparing documentation, followed by the team of specialists from Pontificia Universitat Católica del Perú, was taking place from 2013 up till 2016, when I started to collect the data from already prepared documentation and the artifacts themselves to complete my research. The main goals of the documentation process in general is to provide a detailed, readable database for future analysis and to secure knowledge about the elements of the collection. After artifacts are transferred to the museum, they can be recatalogued as a museum collection. It is very important to collect all the significant measurements of an artifact, describe it in detail, make a technical drawing with special care for decoration and the lips of the pottery, especially if the object represents great value for the whole collection. The lips and necks of the pottery are very important for creating typology series and have a great impact on the chronology. An archaeologist needs several years of training to be able to correctly document all these elements, especially since the most common way to document it is by measuring it manually and drawing it up. The collection from Tablada del Urín, which was the subject of my research, required over 2 years of work from a team of photographers, draftsmen, and archaeologists performing manual measurements, and their research didn't stop there. All found lips and their fragments were drawn, and the object was photographed. The process took several months of continuous work by the entire team, during which each item had to be touched many times, which exposed it to the risk of damage, for example, made with measuring instruments. All the collected measurement data were entered into a common database to which I had access in the electronic version. Even then, having all the basic information already prepared, I had to spend 4 months to complete their reliable database containing all the elements needed to my analysis. Time and energy of many people spent on the project resulted in satisfactory research results and documented the fields in a way that secures the basic knowledge about the set. However, in the area of today's technological possibilities, enabling, among other, automatic measurements, we can question the accuracy of manual documentation. There is no doubt that the technology, controlled by a scientist, will be much more accurate and standardized. And the image with all data registered that way will be extremely detailed and as objective as possible, which is exactly what is looking for in archaeological documentation. To compare the equality of the documentation and the time needed to complete it, I will use the second example, also of a large collection, the human remains of over 200 individuals from Brześć Kujawski in Poland. The research is carried out by the Biobank Laboratory of the Department of Molecular Biophysics of the University in Łódź, which received funding from European funds for a project related to scanning and digital access to human remains collection. The idea of the program, running in the cooperation with the Department of Anthropology of the University in Łódź, was to create a digital platform available online. For this purpose, the 3D scanner SmartTech 3D Universe was purchased. The remains from the historical inhabitants of Brześć Kujawski were chosen for the project because, according to archaeologists and anthropologists, those areas of central Poland show an uninterrupted continuity of settlement since the Neolithic period, so around 5500 BC. Brześć Kujawski is also an area representative for the Polish population from the early Middle Ages to the 19th century. Having at disposal of a collection of human skulls of inhabitants of given area who stayed there continuously for 7,000 years, a number of tests can be performed to determine, for example, what changes in the physiognomy of the inhabitants through the century. The project assumed the creation of a digital database of bones and skulls. Thanks to additional research, scientists were also able to isolate complete genomes of ancient DNA sequences. After combining it with detailed 3D scans of skulls, anthropologists decided to answer the question of how people's physique changed, as well as determine their ethnicity. In the past, such studies only included manual checking of the morphological features of the skull. Thanks to the 3D scanning technology, anthropologists achieved a complete set of the measured data in a digital version, which made possible to research with detailed analysis and virtual comparisons of changes in the shape of skulls over the last millennium. Through the entire project, anthropologists were also able to determine how people's body height changed from the early Middle Ages to the 19th century. According to the research, the average height of a man in the early Middle Ages was very close to the average from the 1960s. Then there is noticeable a decrease of body height, which continued through the 19th century. During this period, the average man was just over 160 centimeters, and this average begins to increase significantly and continues to this day. According to the researchers involved in the project, the creation of a digital database of human remains and complete genomes contributed to setting new trends in the field of scientific data sharing. Scientists see the need to reach both other researchers who will use digital data for future analysis and history enthusiasts who just want to expand their knowledge about this area and their former ancestors. The 3D scanning process is completely non-invasive and touchless, which allows for detailed measurements of archaeological objects without endangering their surface. The great adventure of 3D scanning using white structured light is the perfect color reproduction and high accuracy of 3D scans. In addition, the software provided with the scanner for the project has the function of, among others, creating virtual cross-section of an artifact, making precise measurements, checking the volume of an object, etc. That being said, anthropologists from the University of Łódź received an ideal tool allowed them to expand their research. Scanning with structural light technology enables 3D geometry sampling even on the whole surface and placed every measured point in the coordinate system. Every measured point has known determined measurement uncertainty, what means we know what is a possible mistake in the placement of every point. For scanning with structural light, such a mistake can reach 0.005 millimeters. Compared to manual documentation and even photogrammetry, which is growing in popularity among archaeologists, these errors are minimal, much smaller than with any other documentation method. At the same time, the information we collect with 3D scanners offers great opportunities for future analysis, and the process of registering this data is incomparably shorter. The use of appropriate software allows to automatically transform the cloud of points to the metric 3D model as a triangle mesh, reflecting the color and the texture of an original object. As a result of placing the model in the coordinate system, achieved artifact representation can be measured in every plane. 3D models are an exact copy of scanned objects, so data from the scanning process can be used for digitalization and archiving of the collection. The achievable resolution of a model is the highest of all digitalization methods used in archaeology. The measuring process is touchless, which increases the safety of the delicate artifact, and the process leads to documentation that is detailed, precise, and free of most errors that can be developed during traditional manual archaeological documentation. All that is needed is to place the artifact on the rotary table, calibrate it with the scanner, and start the scanning process, and the device will perform the measurement of the whole surface without any interference. A single scan can take less than a minute, so depends on the size of an object and the software settings, we can achieve a finished metrical model with color and texture reproduction in several minutes, when drawing and photograph artifacts with complicated form can take even a few hours. After scanning, it is possible to make many measurements and create automatic reports, take a photo of a model from various directions, and make virtual cross-sections in any plane. Moving to the software, I will show you its basic features to present how simple and intuitive it is to use. The area of complicated program that process data very slowly is happily behind us. Now all you need is basic training, and after a few hours of work you can fully use the potential of the scanner. Because I don't have access to the skull from Brześć Kujawski, I use the figurine from Malta to present the possibility of data processing. As you can see in the project 3, you have 2 groups of measurements which come from the scanning with automated rotary stage. The first one is for the front and the second one is for the back of the object. As you can see, it's not aligned, so we need to put those 2 groups together. For this, we can use manual alignment. We set up the stable cloud and the cloud to fit. And right now we need to pick 3 characteristic points which will be approximately in the same place on both of the views. Now, in the left window, we can see the whole model. We still have some noises around the object, but for clearing this, we can use the automatic function of the program. Of course, if you want, you can do manual filtering. We can also remove some contours and groups of points. Now you can see the clean point cloud. And for the last few steps, the final alignment with the use of the global function, you just click Align. The software will do many iterations and put each cloud in the right position. At the end of the process, we have the report with accuracy shown. We can apply the changes and create a triangle mesh. The triangle mesh is a surface created by the triangles. It has the information from the point cloud about the XYZ coordinates, and it is very accurate. Now you can put the texture on and use the ready model for visualization, research, or 3D printing. To apply the texture to your model, we just set our clouds visible, and then in the texture tab we can create it. And there you can see the mesh with the texture. As you can see, the details and depth of the decoration are clearly visible. Even on the bottom, you can read the label. What we can also do with our mesh, for that I will turn off the texture for better visualization. we can make some measuring of the area. So we can check the area of the full mesh or only chosen part, in this case the bottom of our object. Just select the back face and check the area measurements. Here you have the area only of the selected part. Also, we can make some cross sections of the object. We can create one. And we can do 2D dimensioning and 3D dimensioning. At first, I will show you the 2D dimensioning, so we can measure from point to point. And the perimeter of this green line you can see there. Also, you have the external parameter and the total parameter of the cross section. If needed, you can measure the distance of its cross section or the mesh. I will do 3D distance and check the distance between 2 points. You can check the length and the width of the object. You can do it on the triangle mesh and the point cloud. So if you want to check the height of your object, you can just click 2 points and here you have the height. Also, as small details as all the small scratches on our mesh are visible. There is a possibility to do an automatic comparison of an object, but it's useful usually when you have a reference model. For example, you can scan the object before the conservation and after to check what area changed. As we saw, achieving the 3D model is quite simple and doesn't require a lot of work. 3D models can be used in popularization or conservation, but also art or marketing purposes. Collected data can be modified, for example, to make a stamp to produce a copy of a coin or to recreate the damaged morphology or lost functionality of an object. The use of 3D scans has great potential for archaeology, museology, and conservation. It can significantly improve and simplify the documentation process. 3D scanners can register several million measured points within seconds. Accurate drawing and photographic documentation of complicated, highly decorated artifacts can take up to several days and requires the involvement of a skilled archaeologist. With the traditional manual documentation, it is necessary to lift and turn the object many times, which exposes it to damage. In addition, it creates the possibility of measurement mistakes. The use of a 3D scanner eliminates most of them. The entire scanning process is automated and requires minimal involvement of the scientist. The use of a 3D scanner in the project of digitizing human remains from Brześć Kujawski made it possible to significantly reduce the time needed to document the collection. Drawings and manual measurements of such complicated form like the human skull create the risk of measurement mistakes. It is very difficult to accurately measure all the variables in the structure of a skull bones. If a collection were documented using traditional methods, a huge database would be created full of many photographs and data of each skull, which would be difficult to navigate with. This amount of information also creates another problem of publishing it in a form that allows other researchers to use it. Scanning their remains makes it possible to place their models online, which makes access really easy for everyone interested. Those models can be used for measurements as well as more advanced research states. For example, models can be compared with each other in the software, which will automatically highlight the areas with the similarity imposed by the operator. In addition, the scanner used in the project of the Biobank Laboratory of the Department of Molecular Biophysics at the University of Łódź records data that can be used in the archiving process. The application of the latest technology in the process of building the internet platform has also expanded the results to recording data for archiving the collection during the registration of the 3D model creating. To sum up, Archaeology is a science that requires extremely detailed, carefully collected information about the artifact and their surrounding. I think that the basics of the documentation used since 19th century as hand technical drawings, descriptions and photos are still very important, but I am very happy we can incorporate the newest technologies into it. Already popular photogrammetry, really useful during registration of the site or monuments, becomes not enough when we have the newest possibilities. 3D scanning. Structured light technology is safe for the artifact, and the results are way better than during any kind of hand documentation. And of course, the time needed to create the database is incomparably smaller with the use of 3D scanner. So if we can have more accurate, more detailed, easier to navigate and work with the database, that will be at the same time a safe way to protect the information about the collection, why not use it as a standard more often? I needed 4 months to make a readable database for my research for Tablada de Lurin pottery, when I had the results of a few years' work of a group of scientists. The ready-to-use 3D model of a single skull registered with a 3D scanner can be made up to an hour and provides much more detailed information about the measurements and the structure of artifact. Thank you for your attention. If you have any questions, please contact me via chat, email or LinkedIn. Bye.
Hello there, and welcome to my presentation on entering your heritage career digitally during COVID-19. So my name's Vicky, and I'm a master's graduate from the University of Southampton, where I got my MSc Business and Heritage Management Masters last year. And prior to that, I did my undergraduate degree also at the University of Southampton in Archaeology and History. I've been working in the heritage industry paid for the last 3 years or so, and prior to that, I did lots of voluntary experience in heritage, so I feel like I've amassed some knowledge as an early careerist and what it's like to start out in the industry. So part of the reason why I want to do this presentation today is when the pandemic hit last year, I was actually looking for my first graduate role. I was lucky enough to have a paid museum role in front of house, where I was unfortunately furloughed like a lot of museum professionals were. And during that time while I was on furlough, I realised how difficult it was going to be to find another heritage role, just because of the impacts of the pandemic and lockdown and just the limitation on jobs that happened. So I hope this presentation will be helpful to you if you're an early careerist or a career mover, or you're just looking for ways to make yourself seem as attractive as possible to employers. I hope that there will be something here for you. So the agenda for the presentation today is, firstly, we're just going to discuss the impacts of COVID-19. Obviously, this is all my personal opinion, so everyone will have a different opinion or a different experience during the pandemic, but this is just how I've seen COVID-19 and its effect on the industry. Next, we'll talk about having an online presence and why it's important, because prior to COVID, I hadn't really thought about how employers were seeing me online. And actually, I think as the world moves forward and it becomes more digital, it's more and more important to make yourself look employable online. Then we'll just do some sort of back to basics, practical skills on CV writing and cover letter writing, because I think prior to COVID, I thought my CV and cover letter were good. But in hindsight, they could definitely have been better. And as the first thing that employers see of you, you want them to be excellent and to really shine. Next, we'll talk about social media and how to craft yourself sort of a social media presence, because lots of museum professionals, as well as other heritage professionals, have their own like personal and professional social media where they can connect with other like-minded individuals. So we'll talk about the importance of that and how to do that. And finally, I'll just give some resources. Obviously, the list of resources is endless. These are just specific resources I found really helpful while I was applying for my first role. So firstly, the impact of COVID-19 on the heritage industry. As I'm sure you're aware, there are lots of negative impacts of COVID-19 on heritage as well as retail. Anything front of house customer facing had to be shut down and most professionals were working from home. So I compiled this list of statistics. Obviously there are lots of statistics from lots of different reports. The ones I've used you can find in my bibliography at the end. Most museums, 95%, were closed during the pandemic, which meant most museum professionals were working from home. And unfortunately, as other industries had a similar fate, there were lots of redundancies. So 13% of permanent staff and 27% of temporary staff, amassing to the best part of 5,000 redundancies. And in terms of museums themselves, 1 in 10 may never reopen, and 30% of museums may have to downsize to still be financially viable. So you can see the negative impact that COVID had, but if you read between the lines, for early careerists, people like me who were just breaking into the industry and looking for their first full-time role, there weren't the jobs there because museums had their own issues, you know, that they weren't putting out the job adverts, and the job adverts that did go out were so competitive because you were going up against people that had faced redundancy themselves and were looking for another role, also people that were changing careers who had a lot of experience. So for me personally, I experienced a lot of rejections, and that was really disheartening because a lot of them were for roles that I thought I'd be really good at and thought I had the experience for. So my personal journey, when I was doing my degrees, I worked really hard to amass sort of a voluntary base of experience because heritage is difficult to break into even at the best of times because there's so much competition and so much experience and knowledge. There are so many people that are interested in so many different things and have really unique skill sets. So I knew that once I'd finished my degrees, I wanted to make myself as competitive as possible. So I did various volunteering placements, internships in collections, front of house, events, just everything I could get my hands on really, just to make myself seem as enthusiastic as possible. And I was lucky enough to land myself a front of house museum role before the pandemic hit that I was then furloughed from. But whilst I was on furlough, I did recognise that my next role might have to be slightly different because I wasn't able to continue showing my enthusiasm through voluntary placement. So I didn't really have anything current on my CV that I was doing, you know, to make myself seem, you know, as attractive as possible. So I tried to do some online courses and sort of continue my personal and professional development from home, just to show that I was still willing and able while I was not able to be there in person, basically. And I thought that my CV was all singing, all dancing, but in hindsight, I definitely think it could have been better and I could have capitalised more on the experience that I had, and we'll discuss that more when we talk about CV writing. So firstly, the importance of an online presence. So like I said, I hadn't really thought much about my personal online presence, and I thought that, you know, social media was just for personal use. But then I started to have a look at how many institutions and companies were using social media and had their own online presence, and especially when the pandemic hit, how they moved online almost. So when I started to look into this, as you can see sort of from the list there, UNESCO identified 600 references to online resources from all across the globe really, including online meet and greets, sort of digital tours, exhibitions that went online, as well as, you know, social media activity, you know, Facebook groups and sort of Twitter hashtags and games and ways to get the public to interact with each other and with museums. So that sort of digital engagement went really, you know, really crazy. So the pictures there are just two of my favourite innovations to come out of COVID-19. So the first one is Cocktails with a Curator that was on YouTube. I really enjoyed this series. I watched it quite a few times during lockdown because it gave a more personal approach to archaeology and history, because you sat down with a curator sort of, and it felt like over a glass of wine, and they told you their favourite bits of the collection, and it almost created that like social history side of things, which I thought was really such a good idea and, you know, really fun. And then the second one is #CuratorBattle, which is where on Twitter pictures were shared from different museums, and it just created a new way to network really, because museums were all talking to each other, the public could see it and get involved and comment and hashtag and tweet, and that started to get me thinking about networking. And although I wasn't able to network in person, which is really important as an early careerist to meet sort of like-minded professionals, people were doing it online, and maybe I needed to have a think about how I could do that. So, like I said, due to all of the negative impact of COVID, there was a lack of opportunities to meet in person, and everything moved online. So for me as a student, online lectures, but also everything moved to emails and phone calls and Zoom meetings and Microsoft Teams meetings. And once I started to recognise that, I was like, oh, you know, maybe I need to find a way to go online too. So I started to consider my online footprint. When you start to look at all of the institutions that are online, I mean, these are just a few that, you know, I was interested in. On LinkedIn, you've got loads of different companies and institutions that engage with their LinkedIn following, and they post and give you updates, and they give job adverts as well on LinkedIn. So I started to see more engagement there, as well as Twitter and Instagram, where museums, as well as archaeological units, heritage bodies, you know, GEM, which has job adverts as well, start to tweet a lot. I mean, they were tweeting a lot already, but you would see it more online. It was more active. Instagram was more active, and so was Twitter. So then I started to consider what people could see of me online. So the first thing, obviously, that employers see a lot of the time is your Cvn cover letter. So I started to consider my Cvn cover letter, and I had a lot of feedback from the roles that I was rejected from, and that's one bit of advice: always ask for feedback, even if you don't really want it and you think that you're doing well. They might just pick up on something you hadn't recognised, and I definitely found that. I was told at one point just to try and shorten my cover letter a little bit because it was over a page, and obviously I have a role now, and I like to think that that sort of advice made me an attractive candidate when I got invited to interview. So in terms of your CV, and this is really back to basics, just making your CV as personable and interesting as possible, because employers will be reading lots of CVs and you want to make yours stand out as much as possible. So the first thing I did when I changed my CV was to add a picture of me, because especially if you weren't meeting in person, then they might never get to see you. So you just give them an indication of who you are through a picture, and mine shows that I'm confident and friendly and hopefully interesting. But also in terms of the CV itself, just making sure that it was short and sweet. I would say that, you know, it should be a maximum 2 pages. I think mine's just under 2 pages now. But if you're really early career, you know, if you can get it all on 1 page, then excellent, without it being not detailed enough. You know, there is definitely a balance. But also making sure it's well ordered. So just simply having your most recent experience at the top and earlier experience at the bottom, and making sure that, let's say you were stating that you'd worked in archiving and you'd carried boxes. Don't just say you carried boxes, say that you assisted the post-excavation team with archiving. You know, show the experience that you've got, because you didn't just carry boxes, and you need to show how your experience fits into the wider picture. So I definitely had a revamp of my CV in that way. And it is really simple. There's lots of templates online that will help you, so never be afraid to sort of have a bit of a Google and look at other people's CVs and see if there are things you can pick up on from there. Very similar, your covering letter. If you have a theme on your CV, try and carry it through to your covering letter. It will just make you look more professional, and that you've taken more care and time to make them fit together. I would also say try and make your covering letter 1 page, because yes, recruiters will be reading lots of covering letters and CVs, and you don't want to bore them by having a really long CV and covering letter. Make sure that covering letters are headed appropriately. This is one thing that I was actually doing wrong when I applied for one of my roles, and I had some feedback that my covering letter was a bit too long, and also that the addresses weren't formatted right. So I had a Google of how to format cover letters, and that really helped me. Make sure it's concise and it has a formal tone. You know, don't go too relaxed. Make sure it seems professional, but also show that you're confident. Don't ever say, I think I can do this role. You say, I'm confident that I have the skills to do this role, and this is why. And then everything that you said in your CV, you give examples of in your covering letter. So if you said that you're a really good team worker in your CV, in your covering letter, you say, I've worked with 5 different teams, and I team led this team, and this is all my team working experience. So give a specific example from at some point in your career where you've done that, and then they'll work amazingly together. So that's just some practical advice. Obviously, Google has lots more than that, but that's just my personal advice. Then next, how to craft yourself on social media. I think the first thing I did was I privated all of my personal social media, just because I think it makes you seem more professional, and then I have more control over what people are seeing of me, because on your personal social media your friends might post things that you might not necessarily want associated to you in a work sense. So I think just privating your personal social media for data protection as well is just like a smart thing to do. But firstly, I'd like to talk about LinkedIn. So LinkedIn I really discovered during COVID, during the lockdown, because prior to that I kind of thought it was more for tech businesses, because I've got a lot of friends that work in sort of software engineering and things like that who raved about LinkedIn, and I always thought, well, for heritage it's not really like that, like you don't really have LinkedIn. But when I started to look at the companies that use LinkedIn, I realised that those are a lot of companies that I would like to work for, so I should really be getting more serious about LinkedIn. So my advice is create a LinkedIn if you don't already have one, but make sure you've got a professional photograph of high quality, something that you would want employers to see of you. You know, even if you can get some friends to take some professional photos of you, that's better than having something that you would have on one of your personal social media. And then make sure you're using it for networking. Obviously you have a lot of companies and individuals on there, so you have the opportunity to contact people in similar roles to you and sort of meet like-minded individuals and even ask some questions sometimes, you know, if it's appropriate. And what I found in my experience is a lot of people are happy to get back to you and help you, especially if they're already in the career you're interested in. So that sort of exchange of knowledge is just networking. It's networking that, especially during the pandemic, you couldn't get in person, but some of these people are all across the globe, so you would never get the in-person chance anyway. So it's that digital networking that I think is so important moving forward. And next, Twitter, another way to sort of communicate with people. You know, you can create your own professional like work Twitter, which I've tried to do myself, but it's still in its early days at the moment, so I am working on it, but I'm so busy at the moment. But definitely it's one of my like year plans to work more on my professional Twitter. But it's another way to get in contact with like-minded individuals and retweet and comment on tweets and just stay in contact and up to date with what's going on in heritage at the moment, because you never know, if you go to an interview someone might ask you a question and if you've just seen a tweet about it, you know, that shows that you're really involved in the community and really enthusiastic about it. So I think Twitter and LinkedIn are my favourite sort of real-time engagement platforms, but also there's other social media. So Instagram, Facebook, company websites. I would just look and see where the companies you're interested in working for or individuals you're interested in working for are most active, and then try and promote yourself there and create a profile and see if that's a way you can get some feedback. So finally, some online resources for early careerists. Obviously this has all been my personal opinion and I don't have any affiliations to the companies I've mentioned. They've just been helpful for me. In terms of resources, there's loads out there, and I would definitely recommend having a Google and seeing what's interesting or helpful for you. But these are just a few I've compiled together that while I was applying for jobs I found really helpful. So firstly, the Leicester Museum's job desk. This is one of my favourite resources. I recommend this to a lot of friends because they post weekly, mostly museum-based jobs, but also they have some voluntary positions on there, and yes, they update all the time, so it's worth just seeing what's out there and in your area. Secondly, Badger, the British Archaeological Jobs and Resources website, which is for more archaeology-based roles, but they also have resources of how to write applications and also some training resources, so also definitely worth checking out if you're in the sector. Next, Arts Jobs, which is a bit more broad and has sort of more range, but still has museum-based and some archaeology-based roles that I've seen on there, so also definitely worth checking out. And then courses and training. So like I said earlier, if you're looking for a role at the moment and you can't get in-person volunteering, because I know a lot of places still have COVID regulations, definitely look into what online training or learning you can do to show that you're still enthusiastic, because I do think one of the things that got me my current role and the role prior to that was showing that even though we were locked down as a country, I was still trying my best to put myself out there and trying to find opportunities by doing online courses and expanding my knowledge base whilst I was furloughed during lockdown. So these are a few online course websites: FutureLearn, Coursera, there are MOOCs, and then look at individual museum websites or museum association that they do offer sometimes free courses, sometimes you have to pay, but I personally have just done free courses as of yet. And also the Southeast Museums and Southwest Museums, which if you're already in a museum-based role, they offer some free training, so definitely worth checking on their website as well. So these are my final thoughts. Obviously, COVID created a very negative impact in the heritage industry, which I think we will still be experiencing for a lot of time now. I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. But one positive that's come out of that is this new way of networking that was definitely there before, but I think has been more capitalised on by professionals and professional bodies now. So it's almost created a way for early careerists to meet each other and other like-minded individuals and discuss how they can further their career. I mean, there's nothing to stop you on LinkedIn if you find someone that, you know, obviously it's appropriate to approach, to ask them if there's anything they would recommend you do that can help you get the role you want. You know, if they have any advice for you. And in my experience, people are really willing to help, especially during such a tough time for early careerists and people trying to break into the industry. And I think without face-to-face meetings, it's ever more crucial that you have an online presence and you monitor what people are viewing of you online. So making sure that your CV and cover letter are as good as they can be, and that, you know, if someone Googles your name, they find your work Twitter or your LinkedIn, which, you know, it looks professional and you have a good picture of you on there, and, you know, it just shows who you are as a professional. And I think as we move forward, all of these things will remain important, even as we come out of lockdowns and hopefully stay out of lockdowns. It will still remain important. So I hope that you've taken something away from this presentation and that it's been helpful in some way. I've really enjoyed doing this, and I think as an early careerist myself, I'm really excited to hear what some of you think about this. So this is my bibliography, which includes some of the reports and things that I've referenced throughout. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you found it helpful.
Hello everyone. First of all, I would like to introduce myself and the topic I'm going to develop today. My name is Claudia Cuadrado. I'm Spanish from Santander. Since I was a child, an artistic vocation has always been within me. That's why I decided to study a fine arts bachelor's degree at University of País Vasco in Bilbao. After that, I started working for a contemporary art center managed by the Botin Foundation. The mission of the Botin Foundation is to contribute to the development of society, exploring new ways of detecting creative talent and committing to it to generate culture, social and economic wealth. To do this, the Botin Foundation develops programs in the fields of art and culture, education, institution consolidation, science, and rural development. Today, it maintains its focus, the area of Santander, but also operates throughout Spain and South America, contributing to the integral development of society, by exploring new ways of detecting creative talent, committing to this to generate wealth. During my years working there, I learned many things about the art world. So that made me take the decision to study a master's degree in cultural management at the Open University of Catalonia, where I learned much more about the art market, museums and institutions, artists, strategies, and art management. Encouraged by those studies, I decided to open my LinkedIn page, where I have been sharing posts about culture and art for all the people who are interested in discovering a little more about this topic. Currently, I'm living in the United Kingdom, and my main interest is to publish information about culture and art on my LinkedIn page because I really enjoy it and I think I can share this information with people who don't usually look for it. The topic I'm going to present today is the digitalization in art, especially these two questions. How has the development of new technologies affected to the world of art, especially in the exhibition areas? And how have the digital decisions improved the work of museums and cultural institutions? First of all, I think it's necessary to introduce you two main concepts, digitalization and art, and see how they both work together. On the one hand, digitalization is the transformation of the information we receive. All the analogic information is saved as numeric or binary. I know that's very generic, so I'm going to give you some of the most common examples. The photograph. I think you can clearly think what is an analogic one and what is a digital one. So you can also think of a scanner instead of paper and, for example, an email instead of a letter. But which are the effects of digitalization? Thanks to the immediacy they have generated, they have radically transformed the global society, economy, and culture. A fundamental resource in the strategy of the digital transformation is the information and communication technologies. These are tools we use for the process, administration, and distribution of the information through technological components, such as mobile phones, TVs, tablets, laptops, etc. So thanks to all of that, we are living in an era in which every person from all parts of the world is connected. Currently, this is also allowing a rapid expansion of traditional businesses, as well as the business creation in emerging sectors, which 10 years ago was impossible to imagine. On the other hand, what is art? In my opinion, art constitutes an essential tool for human evolution, and that's why I see the fundamental need to transmit it to the general public. Thanks to art, we know certainly who we are, what our different cultures are like, what life was like in the past, and never forgetting what are we doing to develop ourselves as the human race. How digitalization and art work together, and which are their advantages. The 21st century has been the century of technological development. It represents a radical change in the way of participating and consuming culture and art, thanks to the enormous growth of the virtual world. In general, thanks to the internet, we can access all types of culture around the world and we are connected without having to leave home. Next, I will mention which are for me the main advantages of digitalization in art. The first one is the accessibility, which I will divide in two sections. On the one hand, I think it is a useful help for people with disabilities. Sometimes the cultural equipment we have in our area is not sufficiently equipped to facilitate access to disabled people. So the use of websites or apps make it easier for them to enjoy an exhibition from home. On the other hand, and depending on the geographical emplacement we live in, sometimes we don't have the economic resources to move to another city and enjoy the exhibition we are interested in. In this case, the development of technology has allowed us to have all the information about it on our computers and phones. I'm aware that in these both examples, it's not the same enjoying an exhibition online as enjoying one face to face. But currently, technology is highly developed, and curiously enough, we can appreciate from our screens details that we can't in a museum. The second one advantage are the times and sharing space when visiting an exhibition. I'm going to give you an example that usually happens to me. When we visit a cultural space as a museum, it sometimes happens that we feel uncomfortable because we want to spend more time that we have in looking at the artwork. In my case, I'm always interested in the brushstrokes on the canvas. And there are more people who want to enjoy this specific artwork. So we feel pressurized and we leave it before we would like to. Also, if we want to take notes, we usually move away and take our time not to disturb other people. This is the time when we are not studying the artwork. The solution to all of this are some websites and apps. Quite a few cultural institutions have decided to publish their artworks on their websites, just to improve our experience. Furthermore, specific application has been created for us to enjoy the art in detail. The best example of this for me is an Italian website called Alta Definizione. They have got there more than 500 masterpieces of Italian art in high definition digital format. The reproduction of colors is absolutely faithful, and you can zoom into and enlarge any area or detail without losing image quality. So, with this tool, we can see the rectifications of the artist when painting the canvas, the paint layers, the cracks, and more details that will be impossible to appreciate in a museum. In general, these new tools can help us to complete our cultural visit 100%, and they prepare us as well before the visit, discovering details that we will never see live and enjoying double ones there. The creation of new exhibition concepts is also an advantage. The digitalization is allowing us to create exhibitions that we had never imagined. For example, I believe that if we think in a plastic artist like Vincent van Gogh, in our minds all we can imagine some of his canvas being exhibited on a museum wall. But actually, we can enjoy as well a multi-sensory experience about his art, like for example Van Gogh Alive, the experience. This exhibition, currently in London, offers us something different and fresh. Traditions of tiptoeing through silent galleries and viewing paintings from afar in quiet contemplation are forgotten as visitors find themselves interacting with art in ways they never imagined. This different exhibition gives to the visitors the sensation of walking right into his paintings, a feeling that is simultaneously enchanting, entertaining, and educational. Adults and children delight in this upper scale show, viewing artwork from new angles and discovering unique perspectives. Finishing with some of the advantages, we don't have to forget connectivity. Cultural and art apps are more and more numerous and are helping us to create a proximity between art and the public, and also to simulate their diffusion and marketability. The intention is to create an art community around mobile apps and debate among the users. Several cultural spaces like museums are putting faith in for those tools as marketing strategy to capture the attention of a minority audience. For example, thanks to social networks like Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, among others, more young people are interested in visiting some exhibitions and discovering new cultural space unknown to them. Another significant benefit of the use of social networks in art is that many emergent artists are being discovered by people and cultural institutions, which is increasing the job insecurity. In general, thanks to the digitalization in art, all the people from all parts of the world can be connected and can exchange different opinions. In fact, this event, with conference of the speakers from all parts of the world, for me is the best example. We all are giving our personal point of view about the digitalization, and the public can give their opinions through the social media. This event is one more example of how we conceive digital development and how we are participating in this. The public is part of the process, of the relationships we want to create with other users, and what will emerge from all this. This is new. In conclusion, I think digitalization is an incredible tool as a marketing strategy for the cultural institutions and something that allows to society to be connected regardless of culture or economic position. But also, I think we have to use it properly as a complement to improve our knowledge and not as the only tool. With all of this, with all of that, I finish here my presentation. I hope I have generated you more interested in this topic, developing some of the context I believe are important between art and digitalization, and by asking ourselves, how far do digital decisions improve the work in the museums and cultural institutions? And which are the best combinations of traditional and new technologies? Thank you so much. And I would like to say to Alta Definition team, thank you as well, because they have allowed me to show you a little more about their new digital tool. Bye bye. See you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Adam Lesh, founder and chief technologist of the Maker Foundry, and I'm here to talk about gamifying the museum experience with AR and blockchain. So let's define a few terms. Gamification is turning anything into a game that currently isn't a game. So the idea is, of course, to get the benefits of fun and rewards and things like that applied to a different situation. And I'm going to use the term cultural institution to refer to museums, historical sites, botanical gardens, things like that, just to keep things simple. Let's talk about a few stats. The top 20 museums get about 105.5 million annual visitors. The top 20 games, online massive games, get about 30 million annually. Wait, hang on, sorry, I got that stat wrong. It's actually 30 million daily. So we're really comparing apples to oranges when we say that. So to compare them correctly, it's nearly 11 billion people play games every year. Now, of course, the same people play the games a lot. And of course, the same people visit museums a lot. And let's get a little bit better stat, and let's talk about cultural institutions. And for that, it was difficult to find the data. I estimate it's about 500 million people visit cultural institutions on an annual basis. So back to what we were talking about earlier with augmented reality. I do want to differentiate between virtual reality and augmented reality. So virtual reality is working in an entirely new environment. You access it with immersive goggles, you have gloves on, And it could be anything. It can have no basis in our reality. It could be fantastic. It could be science fiction. It could be reality too, in a sense. But it's all generated by a computer, and that's all you see. You're completely immersed. Augmented reality, on the other hand, is actually an overlay on our existing environment. So you see something through a camera, through potentially goggles or glasses that isn't there, but you're seeing it overlaid on the real world. So it must have some grounding in reality, or else it won't make any sense. The current uses of augmented reality include things like pilot training and simulations, sports broadcasting. I'm sure you've seen overlays on top of games where you can see the position of the ball or people or what happens next. Things like that. That's augmented reality. Surgery, car repair, again, sort of giving a visualization of what's happening and an overlay of that so that you get a sense of, how you can actually interact with that actual item with some additional information. They're all amazing, they're all really valuable, but they're really simply added information, pretty passive experiences. Now, taking it to the next level, there are some games that are played, and the most famous one is Pokemon Go, where basically through your camera on your phone, you wander around, you look, and you see a Pokemon, and you can try to capture it. There's another one for Transformers. Now, these are a little bit better, but better is the wrong word. These are a little bit more apropos to what we're talking about today because they're active experiences, and that makes them more fun. They're popular. They actually have some pretty good lives, but they are short-lived because they're repetitive and not really that challenging, and of course, they're really for kids. Let's talk about another immersive experience that would be relevant to what we're talking about, and that's escape rooms. Escape rooms are really interesting. They are becoming super popular. In the United States alone, $750 million in annual revenue. There are 10,000 of them, give or take, worldwide. 50 million people visit them on an annual basis, and you can see how they're growing on a country-by-country basis on this chart. So why do people like escape rooms? Well, they're entertaining, they're fun, there's a gaming element involved, there's an adventure element, and of course, it's a break from the real world. So these are really interesting experiences people are doing physically. So again, not sitting behind a computer, but also getting an active experience out of it. There's the fun of social aspect. You're doing it with your friends. I think the biggest limitation is that they're one and done. You can have multiple escape rooms in the same place. You can visit them, but there really is no connective tissue, and there's nothing that you take from one escape room to the next. That's where MMOs, or massively multiplayer online games, come in. So this is a more non-active experience, but it is very, very interesting in that it generates a tremendous amount of money, as we were talking about earlier, 43 billion annual revenue worldwide, 30 million players a day for the top 20, and obviously super popular. They're challenging, they're entertaining, and they're really a lot of fun. So why do people love them? Well, one of the big elements of it is story. You actually, as a participant, are involved in an overriding narrative. You get to have an experience, have an adventure. There's a story to it. You experience with other people, with other characters. There's that social aspect to it. You actually take your character and you grow. You earn experience. You earn rewards. You earn objects and artifacts. There's that sense of accomplishment. And usually you can finish a challenge or a quest. And again, that sense of accomplishment. And again, when you're doing with other people, there's that sense of shared purpose. What's really exciting about this, in my mind, is that all of this fun, and they pay to do it. So there's a lot of money out there. There's that $43 billion. There's that nearly 11 billion people or experiences, plays happening every single year. There's a lot of market share there. There's a lot of information. And I believe we can connect that to the cultural institutions. Why do you say? I think it's the perfect source for story. There's history, there's art, there's adventure, there's excitement. There's so much material, some of the material, which, by the way, is used in these games in one way or another. And why don't we tap into the real thing? You can imagine a game where you're actually experiencing this in an augmented reality way in a cultural institution or a historical site. Very exciting in my mind. You have large footprints. There's space for these things to be played, so people can go from place to place to place and experiencing different elements of a quest or a challenge. There's very low cost. You don't have to put any kind of installation in the existing exhibits or places. You don't have to install electronics. You don't have to put up a sign. None of it. It can all be done in the app with geolocation and sometimes image recognition. So it'll recognize the space and then pop up something in AR. Simple rewards will actually motivate people to play these games. So there's not a lot of cost there either. Badges, just something that you earn. It's just virtual. There's no cost at all. And it's what you earn when you achieve a goal. There's discounts at the store. So that's something you can offer from your institution, a discount at the commissary, a discount at the store. Not necessary, but it's something, and obviously it's a relatively inexpensive way to go. And then there's virtual collectibles. This is really exciting, and we'll talk about that when we talk a little bit more about blockchain. So again, back to stats a little bit. The Louvre is the most popular museum in the world. From 2019, it had 9.6 million visitors. We won't talk about 2020. If we took 0.1% of the top 20 MMOs, we get 9 million people, 9 million experiences. So we could virtually double it at the tiniest fraction. So let's hope that we could get more. So how does it all work? Well, there's a variety of different levels to playing games like this, and I think it fits very, very well into the cultural institution paradigm. First, you can have single location games. There are many of them. They're quick and easy to complete. They have self-contained stories, but can interlock, so you can treat them like sequels or connect them up in some way, but they don't necessarily have to be connected. Individual players are perfectly capable of playing a game like this, but it's also fun with 3 to 5 other players, and we call them parties. People party up and they share in the experience right in the app. And then the rewards are small. There's not a lot of reward there, but it's something. It's some incentives. Again, some of it could be virtual and some of it could be actual. Then we have multi-location games. So we have cultural institutions group up, have multiple experience that drive people from one to the other. And again, they're fewer, they're more difficult, there's larger parties involved, more people in order to be successful. Sometimes maybe one party could do one location and one party can do another location. And then there's increased rewards, presumably. And finally, we have what we call world events. Now, a world event would probably not work even trying to get it coordinated amongst institutions. So there would have to be a third party to create a game that as you grow, as your characters get more experience, as you can find bigger groups, they're called raids, maybe multiple parties form a raid, they can actually have an experience around the world happening simultaneously with different groups of people and achieve a goal and get a big reward. So just to give you a sense of how this might work, here's a little video that we put together, give you a very, very quick example of how much fun this could be. So I hope you enjoyed that. Let's talk a little bit about blockchain. What is blockchain? Blockchain is a decentralized ledger of transactions. So imagine a spreadsheet and someone wants to add a transaction to it. So there's a buyer and a seller and a value. You put a row into the spreadsheet. You then request that it gets added to the chain. Computers compute and do their thing. They add it to the chain, and then it's validated. Now you want to do it again, same process. Now there's another row in the spreadsheet, and another row, and then another row. And the cool part is you cannot change those rows. You can't go back and change them, fix them. If you want to put a adjusting transaction in, you put another one in that adjusts a previous one, and that cannot be changed. So that's an immutability that makes it a very strong store of data, which makes it ideal for rewards. There's transparency. People can interrogate the blockchain. It's immutable, so that value does not get lost. There's exchangeability among the games. This is very exciting. The idea that multiple games, we were talking about, like the multi-location ones or even the world events, a gold coin is worth a gold coin. That's exciting, so that you can actually play different games in the same universe, but at different locations, and even with different sponsors, different cultural institutions, different rewards that might be of value. So your gold coin is worth a discount of 5% one place and 10% in another. But that the idea that there really is worth the same thing that can be interchanged is very exciting. And they're very secure. Personal information is protected. There's no chance that your personal information is going to get out because it's well protected on the chain. And then, or technically, it's not on the chain. You're represented by a hash. Can't be checked out. So that just keep that in mind, is that it's very, very secure and it can't be hacked. So all these values are what makes it so good for rewards. Now let's talk about something we talked about earlier, were those virtual collectibles. Well, that's in the blockchain world, and you've heard this term, I'm sure, non-fungible tokens. And that's a representation on a blockchain that is totally unique. It has its own address, its own hash, and so therefore no one else has it. Now, you can have multiple copies of the same thing with their own unique hashes. So you can have magic swords, as an example, on the screen, and there could be 5 of them. And they are, then what's really cool is they are obviously collectible. People can then maybe trade them and create a marketplace out of them, and it gives incentive for people to play. What happens in-game? The cool part about blockchain is that once we design it this way, it can be interoperable. So again, you can take your magic sword and go from one location, one game, one quest, one challenge to another, and use that same sword with its same attributes. You have your experience and growth can be standardized. So again, across all the games, you get experience. Your character grows, not just within one location, but multi-locations and even up to world events. Artifacts and game currency can be used in more than one game at this, and have the same value, be consistency. So that's really exciting about this concept, and that's what blockchain brings to the table. And then even more exciting, and this is a little bit far out there, but the idea that this whole thing could be open source and people could design their own modules. So instead of it all being on the backs of a game designer or the cultural institutions, people can start doing their own games, plugging them in, offering their own rewards or just experience, and it can be a lot of fun for people to actually participate in the overall ecosystem and environment. Now let's talk about data. With blockchain, with any of these apps, you're going to get data. Very exciting, obviously, because players can opt in to share their data. And again, you give them incentive, they opt in. Otherwise, their data is safe, just GDPR rules. And we make sure that it's protected, but they can opt in for some kind of incentive. It could be more experience, it could be nothing. In other words, no cost, or it could be a discount again. And once that data starts flowing in, you now have direct marketing line to your customers. You can generate insights based on customer activity and location data. Even if it's not directly related to the game, you can see what other potential exhibits are popular, especially among gamers who are actually playing a game but might stop at a different exhibit. So again, very exciting opportunity to take information that's gathered by this game and then use it in other ways. So in conclusion, I think this is exciting because you can create an active experience and attract the gaming community, which is so big. The gaming community is huge. Even if you attract a tiny percentage, you can drive attendance. And blockchain is ideal for games and rewards to be interoperable throughout an ecosystem, from those single location to multi-location to world events. And the gathered data is going to give you that direct line to your customers and generate insights. So again, you've got all this exciting stuff at low to no cost to the cultural institutions themselves. Thank you very much. Again, I'm Adam Lesh at themakerfoundry.com, and you can find me at adam@themakerfoundry.com. Thank you again. Have a wonderful rest of the experience.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to my presentation titled Smartphone Applications for Enhancing Cultural Visits. My name is Sonia Pujals, and I'm an archaeologist specializing in cultural heritage management and digital archaeology. Well, first of all, let me thank Digital4 Foundation for organizing this interesting conference, and obviously for the opportunity to be here today. Also, my appreciation to the other speakers for sharing your research and your attention. So the subject of my talk is to discuss the role of heritage applications in addressing heritage issues. The outline of this presentation is the following. So first, I'm going to be talking about what is cultural heritage, then heritage apps development, mobile app design, heritage issues, and app proposal, and conclusions. So the first thing that we need to discuss, I think, is what is cultural heritage. Well, even if it's a topic of the debate, but there is a general acceptance that cultural heritage ranges from the tangible to the intangible, from traditions and practices to monuments, landscapes, and artifacts of our day-to-day life. Cultural organizations urgently need promotion due to the instability conditions experienced by the cultural sector. The crisis generated by the current COVID-19 pandemic has negatively contributed to the laborious process of generating interest in cultural visits from a global perspective. Yet, I do think this situation has a positive side, given that the noticeable drop in cultural visits provides time for reflection on how public engagement is being managed with current parameters. Thus, an application aimed at promoting heritage might demonstrate a deep knowledge of cultural consumption behaviors so as to shed light on cultural planning strategies. When it comes to heritage apps development, so there are things that need to be taken into account. The first of all is that the use of mobile devices is increasingly dramatically in cultural and museum sectors. And so there are different approaches. So the first approach is to provide customized devices to visitors. An example is the visitor guide available at the British Museum. This can have facilities in several languages, helping to avoid multi-language museum labels, for example. The second approach is to use smartphones of the visitors themselves by providing a suitable mobile app that can be downloaded onto their devices. This could be an open system such as Android or closed system with associated restrictions. And then there is a third approach, which has been the basis of my master's dissertation for the University of York. So this research has focused on studying how apps can help solve problems in the cultural heritage sector. In these ways, apps are understood as a tool to raise awareness of the population about the value of heritage, its preservation, and a tool for cultural organizations to offer a satisfactory experience to the visitor. So, before planning a mobile app, one should take into account different aspects. So, for which platform should the app be developed? Secondly, would be, is the content mobile ready? And the third one would be how the maintenance and updates are planned to be done. So, choosing the platform when developing a device-specific app is necessary to decide all the different devices that are going to be supported. So, the first thing to take into consideration is the market share. According to StateCounter blog research, one thing which is quite consistent among the various markets is that the main smartphone platforms are Android and iOS. When we talk about content, well, as obvious as it may sound, it should always be remembered that content is the single most important feature of every cultural app. This means that content has to be engaging, worthwhile, and suitable for mobile use. We need to consider some basic questions about the content, since many apps are derived from pre-existing content, such as the one from museums. One should start by analyzing this content and asking some basic questions like, is it valuable content? Is it easy to read, watch, listen to, and understand the content? Does it require updates? Because updating can be a tricky aspect of mobile apps. And does it make use of the device features? So the first thing that we notice is text. So text needs to keep it as short as possible. Why? Because web usability studies show that people on PCs usually do not read but scan, and this is even truer on mobile devices with small screens and poor contrast. And it's obviously often used outdoors. So the instructions or the guidance would be to break text into small paragraphs, keep sentence short, and use subtitles and lists to make scanning easier. When we talk about images, well, images suffer the same problem as text when used on mobile devices due to the limited size and quality of the screen. This means that users will not be able to appreciate details, for example, of a painting or a monument. If it is necessary to show a detail, it can be useful to enlarge it as a separate image. When we talk about some specifics, so limited size and the quality of the screen, we show the detail, and it can be useful, just as I said, just to keep it in a separate image. And also high contrast images are better, and it's preferable to focus on a few elements rather than use an image full of different details. When we talk about the audio, well, audio is obviously excellent for content for mobile devices because it's ideal for mobile use and earphones and can offer a satisfying user experience. And so audio is the key element in accessibility because it helps to offer an inclusive experience to people with disabilities such as visually impaired users. And mobile apps can be a very good way of reusing valuable audio content that is already available. The opportunity to embed this existing content into a new environment for the user to enjoy should not be missed by cultural institutions. When producing or considering audio content, bear in mind that audio files should not be too long and they should be clearly audible without too much background music because we know that outdoor can, so there are problems obviously about audibility. And one also should carefully take into account the file size because one should aim at making the app as small as possible to keep speed up to its upload. When we talk about video, well, video suffers the same limitations as images, restricted screen size and quality impoverish the user experience. Nevertheless, short videos are normally appreciated by users and can add an emotional layer to the cultural information. Videos distract the user from the surrounding environment, so they should be used carefully when the app is planned for usage in galleries or outdoors, while they are usually much more suitable for use on tablets with larger screen size. When we talk about interactive maps, well, it's one of the most successful features of smartphones. Obviously, we do have Google Maps, and it provides an excellent tool, but one should consider carefully whether to include an offline map as well in order to avoid roaming costs and some inconveniences for the users. When we talk about maintenance, so the updating process should be carefully planned in advance since every time the content is changed, users have to download the whole app from the App Store again, an operation that can be annoying or obviously forgotten. It is therefore advisable to create an automatic updating system that regularly checks and downloads content updates from the web without forcing the user to download and reinstall the whole app. One also should be aware that updates to the device operating system and release the new models can create problems, and so one should plan for a scheduled testing of the app functionalities at least every 6 months. When we talk about mobile app design, so the development of a heritage application should have as its central objective the UX design, user experience design, because from time saving and more significant interaction with our surroundings to effective learning, a well-designed user interface is an essential factor for improving the relationship between population and heritage. We do enhance this relation based on the 7 aspects of the UX that can be just realized as think, feel, and use. One important aspect is to targeting audiences. And it's important to offer an application that is inclusive and it's accessible for the most part of the population. So for instance, if we take into account visually impaired users, some of the key aspects are applying larger font size, a clear calligraphy, a spacing between lines and paragraphs, and in order to avoid red color blindness, so obviously we need to avoid the use of red, green colors in adjacent spaces. That will provoke an enhancement to the usability of the application. When we talk about heritage issues, so the literature review of this research has centered around the state of affairs and prospects for cultural visits. We have centered it around psychology, sustainable tourism, heritage values, and gamification. So the phenomenological approach, where the experiential aspect prevails, will be an optimal starting point for a student the relationship dynamics with our heritage environment, because this approach will allow us to explore the sensations people experience when visiting a heritage site. So that way, we're going a step beyond the educational function, just to delve into their own experience of the phenomenon, and providing the management area or the organization area with tools to encourage visits based on research of the phenomenon of experience. The visitor experience will be highly improved, which is beneficial for the visitor, and in turn, user experience improvement will increase visitor satisfaction, and obviously the flow of visitors to heritage sites will be much increased. We also need to bear in mind we need to study behavioral intentions for cultural heritage tourism, so as to study cultural and consumption partners, just to plan cultural strategies that are adequate to the current parameters. Another interesting debate is what is the heritage values. It's all about education and gamification for incentivizing heritage visits. So the research on visitor experience conducted by Fang and Arifin, so they are pioneers in applying experiential marketing exercise, is based on three central notions that are civic experience, novelty experience, and leisure experience. And the research results illustrated that the most determining variables for visiting a cultural site are the civic experience and the leisure experience. And these two variables will be closely related to the value of loyalty. So we want visitors to feel that the place is worth visiting and to create like a loyal bond. Also, the rapid pace with which immersive technology has been introduced in the heritage visit sector implies an unstoppable increase in the demands of living a highly stimulating experience. So we need to meet visitors' leisure and entertainment requirements. We need to offer an experience, a true experience to the visitor. Nevertheless, offering leisure is unfeasible. It's not something that we can do in some types of heritage visits. That would be the case of sites categorized as dark tourism, like cemeteries or battlefields. Well, this is a clear example of the need to apply models to encourage cultural visits that are flexible and adaptable to the different natures of cultural heritage sites. So from school age through the age of intellectual maturity, cultural sites are a reference of knowledge. We go to knowledge of self with our history and establish bonds as social entities. I argue that if the objective is to combat inequality in visits and enhance citizen participation, we must improve heritage experience, not only the educational role of heritage sites. I would think that the conciliation between the concept of education, existence, and experience should be the foundation for building a fruitful relationship between society and its heritage. There is also a research conducted by Chen and Chen from 2010. So this research basically established a chain of factors between perceived value, behavior intention, satisfaction, and experience quality. So when we talk about heritage issues, this research just show that the most important problem that we're facing is there is an imbalance in heritage visits. So we have most visited sites and less visited sites. So most visited sites are the ones that normally designated by UNESCO. And so these obviously they do have prestige and projection. But then again, the side zone is that they do have like higher density of visitors, and that could lead to preservation issues. On the other hand, we do have less visited sites. They are obviously in need for promotion. They lack of public recognition, and that leads to being poorly funded, and obviously they also have preservation issues just because of they are poorly funded. And the second problem that we just discovered by this research is that there is a lack of citizen participation in heritage sites. So we do think it's necessary to reinforce dialogue between heritage organizations and people. So people should just come from passive agents to active agents in heritage preservation. And so that's when we come to the app proposal. So all these ideas could be materialized in a map proposal. So, for instance, notably, the imbalance in visits difficult to accurately and reliably estimate the flow of visitors, which is decisive with respect to regional economies, the assessment of environmental carrying capacity, and the provision of the necessary infrastructure to accommodate the flow of visitors. So, one option would be to apply gamification to balance visits via just providing visitors with cultural raffles, so they could go to a site and they could gain a reward by going there. That's good for forecasting resources, and that would boost regional economies because by attracting new visitors to less known areas, so this application would facilitate planning of visits and increase the prospect of staying longer in an area and thus provoking an economic growth. And on the other hand, when we talk about the lack of citizen participation, we can talk about one proposal would be a report function. So that would reinforce the dialogue between organizations and people would pass from being passive agents to active agents of heritage preservation, and that would raise awareness on sustainable tourism. This report function would be just a feature for the users. So anytime they go to a site and they just notice any problem of preservation, from vandalism to preservation issues, they could just write a report to the manager of the site. So this aims to solve heritage preservation problems and break the barrier between audiences and heritage managers. And so when we talk about conclusions, we must say that it's necessary to thoroughly plan the whole app from the start to the finish moment. Targeting audiences is also important, and obviously it's important accessibility and inclusivity, UX and UI design, and apps as a tool for enhancing heritage, not just to show content of a museum. And obviously we think that sustainable tourism is the key for a sustainable future. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, you have my email here and obviously my LinkedIn and my social media profiles. Thank you for your attention.